Hi class, last time we left off we were talking about key success factors, and now we're going to go in and talk about how you organize your business and what kind of information system strategy are you going to make. And so it revolves around the business strategy, your organizational strategy, and your information systems. Now if we look back at some of the other modules, an organizational strategy is different than what a business strategy is, and that's how am I going to marshal my resources. And to think about managers is what kind of levers or tools did they have to make things happen. And so your information system strategy, what's going to support it? Well, it's your organization. And so your business strategy covers everything, whether it's your marketing and HR and everything else. So how am I going to bring all this together? Now my business strategy is the overall plan of how this business is going to work. And so it starts out with, do I have the means and resources to do what I want? And what is it that I'm trying to do? How am I going to create long-term favorable position? And so if you remember, the generic business models that you have, it's based on competition, how do you position yourself, and what capabilities do you actually have. And that went into the entire competitive portfolio. Your organizational strategy is, what are you designed to do? If you're hierarchical, hierarchy is good for if you have isolated functions, like for example, and that's for very diverse businesses. Supposing you're selling to teenagers and on the other end you're selling to senior citizens. So they may not have anything to do with each other, but they probably function better than having them cross together. And so that goes back to what they call the business diamond. Now in terms of organizational strategy, the structure of your organization, how do they report, the experience levels, what processes do you have in place? The thing you're always concerned about is, do you have too many processes? And so there's this balance. The larger you get, the more random behavior you have. The more random behavior you have, the more management you need. But by the same token, you run into issues that you can stifle creativity and individuality. Dr. Cho over the summer was in front of Goodrich and Goodyear and some other older companies, and I just flat out said to him, they were bashing students and how they were trained. But I said, well, what are you guys offering that makes these creative students interested in working for you? Yeah, I wasn't making any friends. Anyway, to a large extent, how does change happen? It's if you have the vision, you have the skills to actually do it, the proper incentives are in place, the resources, and an action plan. And when you're missing pieces, it creates different things. Like if you don't have a vision, it creates confusion. If you don't have incentives, then people... And incentives doesn't necessarily mean if you meet this goal, you get $10,000 or something like that. Incentives could just basically be hygiene. If the company does well, then everyone does well, or something like that. And anyway, that's better suited for a leadership class. And so what it comes down to, though, is fundamentally what your business is about. Drives your processes, your tasking structure, management and measurement systems. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he had a big decision to make because, you know, they only had so much cash in the bank. Gilbert Amelio, who is actually a very successful semiconductor guy, he said he was thinking about competing. Since he's a chip guy, he was just thinking of Apple as a computer company. And so he didn't want Apple to be exclusive. And so he was actually working on having the Apple operating system work off of an Intel processor so he could directly compete with Windows. When Jobs came back, what he pretty much realized is, look, we've never been just another computer company, and it's dumb for us to start now. If we're going to succeed or fail, we're going to succeed or fail is Apple. And so that goes into your values and beliefs, fundamentally, of understanding what your business is about. Now, the levers you have to turn, a lot depends on what kind of organization you actually have. For example, if you have a matrix and no direct reports, that's a much different way to manage than if you have people directly reporting to you. And so, in terms of organizational values, it's, who makes these decisions and who has the right, and what processes do you have in place? What kind of informal networks get created? In every startup I've ever been in, I've ended up becoming like one of the most powerful people in the startup. Why? It's by performing. And I just moved that. And so what I created was informal networks. And so in terms of you being a manager, it's how much data do you have? How well do you plan? And what incentives can you give for performance improvement? I didn't have any money for a startup. So what did I do? I took my people to the movies. Yeah, we had a day off. We went to one of those nice theaters with the big lounge chairs. They ordered lunch. We watched Taken 2. And yeah, it was a cheap way of saying thank you. But the point is I really appreciate it. And so what are also your cultural variables? With your managerial levers, again, a lot depends on what your information is set up as. And so what are the cultural variables, and what can you actually do as a manager? And like, for example, a big part is performance review. Are you in charge of that, or does someone else determine it? How much responsibility do you actually have? That normally correlates to what you can do as a manager. Now, ultimately, there's always a flow of information, and that's why you need an information system strategy. What information do you want to pass around, and how are you going to do it? And so you have to think about the hardware, the software, how you want your network to set up in data. Here's some example of different business processes and chains. You can read it. It's pretty much, but this is where IT and IS come together. Now, Professor Weissy left out one. Okay, he does have it on here. Okay, I didn't see it. But it's more than just data security. It's network security that you're concerned with. And a lot of companies do a crappy job of it. And I talk to IT people, and they just cringe at what their companies do. And this is why companies keep getting hacked. Everybody thinks it's these super sophisticated Russians or Chinese coming after us. And the reality is it's probably done internal. And what guys do is they just probe networks. It's like the typical network, and get hit about 1,000 times in an hour. And it's just people just poking around, seeing if they can find an opening. If they do, then it's all over for you. In this lecture, we've gone over the 3 major strategy categories. And so in the next lecture, we'll start talking more about business processes.